Hi, Doug. You have a very dense post here, and I want to reply to it in detail, so I hope you'll bear with me as I go through it point by point.
If reason is to have any force at all, it cannot be a set of conventions or culturally agreed upon rules of thought, because they would simply be arbitrary and therefore could not be imperative.
Social conventions can clearly be imperative. There are several counterexamples. Think about the law, think about grammar, think about etiquette. These are all social conventions, but are nonetheless imperative. Now, granted that you can violate these things, but people act and think irrationally all the time, so clearly you can violate the rules of reason as well. Social conventions are often far from arbitrary, moreover. Democracy, for example, is a social convention, but it's not like the Founding Fathers just flipped a coin.
And if reason was simply a Platonic form, a piece of furniture of the universe, then it could not impose its rules onto thinking beings. Only a person exercising their will, a powerful person, could do such a thing.
This is flagrant question-begging. This cup right here is part of the furniture of the universe. Seeing this cup in my hand imposes on me the belief that it exists. The cup does not necessarily have to have a will of its own to impose this belief on me. You're assuming that a will is necessary for there to be any imposition on thinking beings, but you've given no argument to that effect, and myriad common-sense examples, like this cup right here, attest to the falsity of this claim.
If reason cannot be accounted for by a source outside of itself, then you end up trying to ground reason by using reason, and that is a logical fallacy begging the question.
This is just the old Socratic question, why be rational? His answer was short and to the point. Merely asking the question presupposes rationality. Your claim that reason needs to be grounded is itself a rationally driven claim. So reason does justify itself because any attempt to criticize reason presupposes reason. In other words, you just can't get away from it. Another way of putting the point might be thusly. Why does reason need to be grounded at all? You can't give an answer to that question without using reason. There is no skepticism that can swallow reason itself, since all skepticism is fundamentally reason-driven. The problem you are trying to use to prove God simply cannot arise in the first place. And moreover, what about the infinite regress problem? If reason needs to be grounded in a source outside of itself, and that source is God, then what source outside of God grounds God? If you claim that God needs no justification because he's independent or something like that, then I can make the same claim about reason.
In addition, notions such as right, wrong, good, bad, etc. have no real meaning or oughtness if they are conventions or societal norms.
There are plenty of objective ways of grounding ethics that make no reference to God whatsoever, and only someone without any intellectual honesty or with a gross ignorance of the history of moral philosophy could simply gloss over this fact the way you do. And speaking about the history of philosophy, what about the Euthyphro dilemma? In case you don't know it, here it goes. Does your transcendent, personal, non-contingent, omnibenevolent being dictate what is moral, or does he recognize what is moral? It seems clear to me that you can't say the latter. If he merely recognizes it, then it's not God that's actually providing the normativity. But if he simply dictates it, then these moral terms are not grounded in anything at all. God has no reason for making kindness moral and murder immoral. It's just his caprice. Leibniz put the point really well. Quote, in saying that things are not good by any rule of goodness, but sheerly by the will of God, it seems to me that one destroys, without realizing it, all of the love of God and all his glory. For why praise him for what he has done, if he would be equally praiseworthy for doing in exactly the contrary?
To do this, however, is to use inductive reasoning. Induction looks at the particulars and extrapolates that this is how the world is without exception.
You're making a fundamental misidentification here of what induction is. Induction is a form of argument that, at best, makes its conclusion very, very likely, very plausible. Deduction is a form of argument that, at best, guarantees its truth beyond all possible doubt. Your claims about induction needing to be absolute seem to be mistaking induction for deduction. Induction is never certain. It is always open to the possibility that a mistake may have been made and that the conclusion might not follow. But that is exactly the way the world works. Just as you say, just because something is true in a given instance does not prove that it's true in every instance. Exactly! This isn't a problem for the atheist, it's a simple fact about the way inductive reasoning works.
For induction to work requires that nature is uniform and that there are patterns of causation. That uniformity must be accounted for in some way. And again, that way can only be in a cause outside of the universe that is acting in it by establishing the laws that govern these patterns and provide uniformity.
You say the uniformity of nature needs to be accounted for in some way. But you haven't done that. All you've done is say, God done it. That's no accounting at all. That's just ignoring the question. How does God account for the uniformity of nature? You can't answer that question without appealing to some sort of uniformity, but that's the very thing you're trying to account for. It is you, sir, who is begging the question. You've given us no reason to think that the universality of nature has to come from a purposive being. The uniformity of the nature could just be a brute fact, in the same way you claim God is a brute fact, one that does not require, nor could have, an explanation.
Finally, there is the problem of the atheistic mind. If there is no soul, then the mind is simply a property of the brain. No brain, no mind.
You're actually invoking mind-body dualism? Do you not realize that this is one of the most thoroughly discarded philosophical ideas in the 20th century, even among religious philosophers? The mind-body problem ate it alive. If you want to say that there is a non-physical soul, then you have to explain how that non-physical soul interacts with a particular physical body. Suffice to say that if René Descartes and the most brilliant minds the last 350 years couldn't do it, I don't have high hopes that you will be able to either.
If this is true, then we're just physical entities, flesh machines. And if this is true, then we are entirely determined by chemical and biological processes, meaning there is no such thing as free will.
The free will determinism debate is a profound one, and you cannot possibly do it justice in the 10 seconds that you've just used to sweep it under the rug. There are good reasons for thinking the universe is not a deterministic system like René Descartes thought, even though it is still a closed physical system. Quantum mechanics, for example, proves the universe is not mechanistic. Okay, I will grant you that quantum mechanics is not entirely clear how that allows for free will, if it allows for free will at all, but suffice to say, it's much more complicated than you've made it out to be, and you're really showing no intellectual honesty by thinking this is a point that can be made that briefly.
Meaning there is no such thing as free will, and therefore no one can be truly held responsible for anything they do.
One of the most rich and thought-provoking responses to the problem of determinism is called compatibilism, which maintains that we can both be determined and still be responsible. I can't summarize their arguments here, and they're not without their problems, but suffice to say, it is again intellectually dishonest of you to completely ignore that discussion. And moreover, your worldview faces a similar problem. If God knows everything, then he knows what you're going to do before you do it, meaning that even before we're born, our decisions are set in stone. God knows I'm going to go to hell long before I took my first breath, so it's not really my choices that determine anything. Now, maybe God's omniscience and free will are somehow compatible, but, again, then we're back to the same point as we were before.
That would mean there would be nothing wrong with rape, murder, theft, lying, etc.
Hold the phone. Of course there would still be something wrong with those things. I can take away your free will. I could brainwash you a la the Manchurian Candidate so you'll kill someone. You wouldn't kill them out of your own free will, but that doesn't mean there's nothing wrong with it. It might be unfair of me to punish you for that murder, but then again, if determinism is true, then I would be determined to punish you, so it's a moot point.
In the end, every tool an atheist uses can only be accounted for by the God of the Bible, a transcendent, non-contingent personal being who imposes his image on us so that we can use our minds to make free moral choices, think rationally, employ induction, and use language. As a Christian, I challenge all atheists to stop borrowing all their tools from the God of the Bible and make your case without using logic, universals, induction, morality, or your minds. When you can do that, I'll take your claim seriously. Until then, every protest you make only proves what you're trying to deny.
This is paradigmatic question begging. By this assertion, you make it impossible for anyone to challenge you rationally, and any attempt to do so proves you right. But I think I've just proven you wrong. I've shown that your arguments that attempt to prove that reason, etc. depend on God fail. Now, you have two options. You can try to make a better argument, in which case I look forward to it, or you can simply assert, your arguments use reasons which you get from God, so you must be wrong. At that point, you've just descended into pure zealotry and dogmatism. But if you're going to use that, then at least have the decency to drop this pretense of rationality and admit that your belief is based on faith, not on reason.